Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to follow up on a question I asked. I feel like it's a month ago now.
It may have been.
The New York Times last week came out with a story that Mississippi was having a hard time getting folks vaccinated, but it's not just Mississippi. It's a bunch of other rural states, Ohio, Oklahoma. They're at 34% vaccination rate. Even so, opening up vaccines to out-of-staters. I know we talked a little bit about before the preliminary steps, but has the White House been in touch with these governors to see what they can do now? Because of course this impacts herd immunity and the goals of the White House just to get these shots in arm.
Well, there are a number of steps that we've taken in the recent weeks, including launching the Community Corps, which is our program to provide fact-based messages into the hands of local messengers. So we're now working with more than 4,000 organizations that have signed up so far across the country, including in a number of the states that you mentioned. We're also investing $3 billion to states and community-based organizations to strengthen vaccine confidence in the highest risk and hardest hit communities. And often people think of that as just Black and brown communities, and that is not. As you've noted, that is also conservative communities, white evangelicals. It's a range of communities around the country. What we found to be most effective is to work with these local organizations. So faith-based organizations, community health organizations, civic leaders, and others who can really get this message deeply in communities. We've also had a number of our members of our COVID team, from Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins, participate in a range of media interviews. You know, an example is Dr. Collins participated in the 700 Club. Dr. Nunez-Smith hosted a faith leaders roundtable. We're also we've run PSAs on the deadliest catch. We're engaged with NASCAR and Country Music TV. We're looking for a range of creative ways to get directly connected to white conservative communities. We won't always be the best messengers, but we're still trying to meet people where they are, but also empower local organizations.
Quick follow-up, does the White House endorse these states opening up their vaccines to folks from out of state? You know, these do expire, so that rather than them sitting on the shelf, they're going to go to somebody else.
Well, these states are all going to have their own implementation plans, and we certainly work with them to advise how to distribute the vaccines as equitably as possible and as effectively and efficiently around states. No state is 100% vaccinated, as we know. So our focus has been working with them on how to get them to the communities that are the hardest hit.
Thank you, Jen. Can you explain the rationale for why President Biden went against the advice of military commanders who recommended leaving 2,500 troops on the ground in Afghanistan?
Well, I think that's an overcharacterization of every military leader, and I don't think they've all provided their point of view on what their advice is, and we'll keep that private. So you can certainly speak to individuals if you'd like, of course. I will say, again, the president welcomed the advice, welcomed at times disagreement about what the appropriate path forward should be. Some insist this is not the time to leave, some opponents of his decision. But his view is that we've been having that argument. That argument has been made for 10 years, and it has not changed the outcome, has not made a military solution more appealing or more effective.
So our Pentagon team reports that most military commanders in the region, and I don't want to give any names because I don't want to violate any on-background agreements, but they say that most military commanders in the region recommended that 2,500 troop level. And if you look at then candidate Biden's own comments from about a year ago, he said that he wanted to leave several thousand troops in Afghanistan. So what changed between now and then?
He asked his team.
One more on immigration. The outgoing Ambassador Jacobson said on Friday that to Reuters in an interview that there was a consideration of conditional cash payments related to the Northern Triangle. Is that something that's currently under consideration? And if so, what are kind of the parameters of what would be looked at there?
That's interesting. I'd have to look more at her context, the context of her comments. I'm happy to do that.
Republican senators have criticized attaching the withdrawal of troops in Afghanistan to September 11th. They say it's politically driven. Do you have a response to that? And also, do you have anything to share on who came up with that deadline and why?
I think it was the president wanting to send a clear message that this is not going to be an open-ended timeline to withdrawing troops. We have had that policy for some time in the past, and he disagreed with it. So he was giving a timeline on when operationally we could move troops out. We also are going to do that in close coordination with our NATO partners and other countries in the region. If it's ahead of that timeline, then that's a positive step, but we wanted to give the military and our diplomatic partners on the ground plenty of time.
So did he choose 9/11 as the final date?
I think I just explained why he chose that
Quick
time.
one on immigration. Vice President Harris just said that her first trip abroad, and it looks like it's going to be to Mexico and Guatemala, but she suggested she won't be visiting the border. And so I'm wondering, first off, if the president is considering a trip to the border, and second, why it's not important for one of, the president's main sort of people that he's tasked with dealing with this to visit the border.
Well, what the president's asked the vice president to do is run point on the Northern Triangle and be a high-level conduit in having discussions with leaders in the region. That's exactly what she is doing and will do when she goes and visits countries in the region. And obviously she's had discussions that have been read out as well with some leaders in the region. Secretary of Homeland Security has visited the border. Our secretary, other secretaries who run point on these issues will, and we expect will in the future. I don't have any visits to preview for you of the president's.
Jen, thank you. Back to Title X, if I may. So today, as you well know, the Biden administration and HHS started the reversal of the Trump administration's ban on abortion referrals at Title X family planning clinics. So my first question, why does the Biden administration insist that pro-life Americans pay for abortions and violate their conscience?
Well, first, that's not an accurate depiction of what happened. So and I know we want to be accurate around here. None of the funds appropriated under this title shall be used in programs where abortion is a method of family planning. That is written into the Public Health Service Act, and it specifically states that.
We know there's indirect subsidies, money that's fungible, that can't be traced. We know that. Come on.
That is not how it works. That is the law. So I'm stating what the law is and how it is implemented legally by these organizations. And the reason since you gave me the opportunity, the reason why the president took these steps is because he believes that advancing equity for all, including people of color and others who have been historically underserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by persistent poverty and inequality, can be helped by these actions. And by focusing on advancing equity in the Title X program, we can create opportunities for the improvement of communities that have been historically underserved, which benefits everyone. That's how these fundings are used in communities.
Equity, if I may interrupt. How is it equity? How is it fighting systemic racism when abortion, we well know, disproportionately affects minority children?
Again, funding cannot be used from this for abortion, but access to health care in communities that have been marginalized, underserved, adversely affected by persistent poverty is always going to be something the president fights for. Okay, I think I've answered your question. Alex, go ahead.
On Afghanistan, did President